Hi there. Welcome to the Leading Forward podcast. One of the resources is part of the Future Forward consulting firm. You are listening to Matt and Pavan. I'm Matt.
Hi, I'm Pavan. I'm an engineering and business operations leader who grew into these roles through mentors like Matt and myself, walking us down these path down the leadership, and by continuously educating myself on leadership.
I have a master's degree in strategic leadership and PMP certification, as well as 35 years of business experience under my belt. We are everyday people trying to make the world a better place through our experience and knowledge of leadership and business concepts. And at the time of this podcast release, we will simultaneously release our book, which is available on Amazon.com, titled The Journey to Exceptional Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe. You can find new episodes every other week on Spotify, Google Music, and Apple Music. And you can also check out my consulting website, future-forward-consulting.com. So let's get started with episode 1.
So let's start with the premise of the book.
Okay,
So what's the premise? Why did we write this book?
So we wrote this book because we were working with a bunch of younger and newer leaders, and we felt that it was necessary to provide them some of the information available along the road to positive leadership and how to navigate potential pitfalls.
Yeah. And it's not even just the young folks that are coming into leadership, but it's also a lot of experienced folks that have been with the same company or the same organization or the same styles of leadership that have not really fully adapted, and a little bit of adaptation is going to change their influence on the people that work with them or under them. And I think it's going to be a very powerful navigation tool on how to avoid those pitfalls.
Yeah, we went into a lot of detail. The book is much longer than I think both of us expected it to be, which is why we're actually going into this podcast. We want to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly of leadership. We want to talk about some of our experiences and go into greater detail about some of the things that we talk about in the book. The book is the actual journey. And is there anything else you want to add about that?
Well, you bring up a good point on the good, bad, and the ugly. We've both seen enough good leaders. We've seen equally bad leaders, and we've seen the ugly side of what happens when you have bad leaders with a bad business strategy and where things land. I think this conversation and this podcast, I think we're going to talk a lot about not just the good styles of it, but also the implications of not fully adapting and not actually embracing the good traits, the good styles, and the evolution of leadership with the today's generation.
Right. And you and I had a conversation the other day about how leadership seems to be changing these days. And we found together that there were younger, hungry for change people out there who were either just getting into that point in their life when they wanted to know a little bit more about leadership. They wanted to know a little bit about management. And they're not really at the point where they know the difference between the two, which is something that we talk about in the book. And we will also go into greater detail in one of our future podcasts. So this podcast is actually an opportunity for those types of people to listen and educate themselves and decide how they want to become leaders, what kind of leaders they want to be. Do they want to be leaders, or do they want to be managers? Do they want to, are they happy just going about their jobs and managing projects or things like that? Or do they want to be a part of making a positive influence on the lives of other people?
And one of the things is people in general are hungry for change. And it's always a teachable moment when somebody comes up to you consistently complaining about a certain leadership style or a certain leadership position that is handling things a certain way, to try and mold that into what would you think you would want to do? How would you go about doing this? Start triggering those thoughts and thought processes to start slowly leading them down that path. A lot of people want to do good. Everybody wants to do good. We have to assume good intent. And a lot of people want change. Sometimes they just don't know where to start.
Right.
And I think even if you are, and one of the things that we talk about in the book is leading without power. A lot of these people don't feel like they have the power, but they do. And how do we channel that? How do we navigate that? How do we get them to start growing into that and start embracing leadership as a career path. We need more people to come into leadership and want to perform like leaders with or without the title. And I think that's what's going to change the corporate culture and the ecosystem we have today.
So I'm going to kind of turn the tables on you. We had talked about doing it the other way, but why don't you start by telling us your personal journey?
So I started out as an engineer in a pretty large company. I remember being a good engineer. It's been a while since I've done real engineering work, but even at that time, I was always having a plan for myself, executing to that plan. I would just run it by my boss. He or she was okay. I just kept moving on. Along the way, it was all about execution, and I was efficient at what I was doing. But I had the benefit of coming across quite a few folks who ended up being my mentors. I talked to my dad a lot about leadership. He was a banker. He had a lot of people reporting into him throughout his career. So I had natural tendencies for leadership, just how I grew up and the conversations I was having as I grew up in my formative ages. But these mentors actually channeled my energy in a better way. They were helping me to look past my objective of what needs to be done, but look at it from a business strategy on, okay, you do this. How does this fit into the big picture? This is great. This is great for what you're doing. How does this help me? And it started really opening up my horizon to say, it's not just one foot in front of the other. It's not just executing what I want to do. I started looking much farther ahead to see where does this fit into the big picture, and then walk my way backwards to what I wanted to do to feel fulfilled. And these mentors had the foresight to say, okay, this guy's got potential, but he needs direction. He needs some, a clear vision, and he's actually going to do better. Then I stayed in engineering, moved a couple of companies, and I had a couple of different types of mentors that were from a different walk of life. They had gone through life differently, and these guys were retired at this point. And I had an opportunity to come into management, which I didn't want to. Honest to God, truth, I always thought if you go into management, that's when you start doing real work, which was completely false, by the way. I've actually done phenomenally good work since I've come here into management and leadership roles where I had the ability to execute much larger things. But it took about a good 6 months for them to convince me. And one of the things that stuck with me was, do you want to be the most efficient person or create another 30, 40 people like you and do good for the business? And that was a trigger point for me where I was like, that's a good point. I have an opportunity to really learn and mold this entire organization that's going to report into me into somebody that does the right things. They're empathetic, they're very self-aware, they're doing right things for the business, they're educating themselves, they're working as a team. That became my new challenge, that became the new high. And we did phenomenally good. But again, it was all these folks that would look out for me and interject at the right times to say, stop. I think you have to consider leadership. And I actually feel bad because I had an opportunity to mold a lot of other people down this path much early on in my career, which is a missed opportunity for me. But now I take an opportunity to meet everyone with the same view to say, what else can they do? It's not what they're doing for us right now. What else can they do? And that just raises the bar across the organization. And to be honest with you, out of all my career, this leadership path has been the most satisfying.
So you mentioned mentors. I think it's important to say that mentors are often the first key into our step into leadership. And with a little luck, that's what we're able to do now. In my case, it was much the same. I had an opportunity to get into a management role, and I was completely against it. I hated managers. I hated people being the boss of me and stuff like that. And it was only through some conversations I had with my brother, actually, when we started talking about what leadership meant and how we could change not only ourselves but the environment around us. And it was through those conversations that I found myself stepping into situations where I could be a leader. And once getting into that position, trying to figure out the best way to guide the people around me and to help them grow, how to take them out of their comfort zone, sometimes without them even realizing. And now, especially with what you and I have been working on recently, being able to provide classes and show a bigger group of people what leadership means, why it's so important, and why we need it today. Like you said, we need more leaders in the world today.
And you bring up a good point. It's not just the mentors that pushed us in. You have a master's in leadership, right? And as soon as I took the first job, the first thing I did, like any good engineer, I started educating myself on what is a leader? How do I go about doing this? There's a ton of books out there. There's phenomenal resources from really smart people. And one of the biggest challenges I had doing that was they are really good information. Some speak really closely to you, some not so much, but there was nothing that really stitched together a journey of what are the key things I have to do to start with. So I went about doing everything. The downside to that was I quickly burnt myself out. But I had extremely good boss who supported me. She was very encouraging. She appreciated what I was doing. And I had the benefit of slowing down at the most inopportune times to recoup. But I think that's one of the reasons we ended up writing the book the way it is to provide a journey of saying, you're coming into leadership? Okay, fear not. There's something that can at least guide you down the right rabbit holes, but you still have to have that growth mindset to go learn, educate yourself, and step into that to say, how do I change this? I'm seeing this problem. It's like any other engineering, math, finance problem or medical problem that any professional out there deals with, is to say, go try to find a solution. But it has to be a solution that works for most of the people that work with you. And one thing that one of my mentors always told me was, you can't make everybody happy. If you set out to make everyone happy, you're fighting a losing battle. But you got to keep the majority happy and figure out how you can help the others that are not happy. Find real solutions. Be empathetic to their problem and to their cause, and try and tailor something that also brings them into the fore. But don't try to do it all at the same time. And I think that's what the journey was essentially meant to be. And hopefully that's what it does for at least somebody. Right?
Well, and one of the other things that we talk a lot about, and we'll talk a lot about in future episodes, is this growth mindset, and also the idea of failure, and not being afraid of failing, because failing isn't necessarily the fact that you did something bad or you did something wrong. It's an opportunity for you to learn. For instance, this podcast. We are going to fail, and we have already failed in the recording of this podcast, but we took it as an opportunity to learn, and we hope to continue learning and growing through recording these podcasts and by talking about this book and all these things that will make us better people, and it will also give us an opportunity to share this knowledge with other people who want to take it the next step beyond where we are.
Absolutely. And speaking of failures, failing is not a bad thing. It teaches you a lot of things. It helps you fix the problems you've had. Communication is the biggest piece. Communicating what you're going through to your leadership structure, to your people, being transparent. To a certain extent, there are things as leaders that you cannot be transparent about, and it comes with the job. But communicating where you're struggling, communicating what you're doing, communicating what your thought process is, it takes the sting out of the failure, and it gets everybody that's involved with you into that mindset of, okay, we see what you started with, we see where you ended up with, not the best outcome, but okay, you have a plan, we trust your plan. So communications, that one piece that has helped me tremendously, is to say, no matter what the outcome, people were bought in, people were understanding, people went through this with me as a journey. Especially one of my early mentors, the first thing they told me is, as a leader, I don't want to be surprised. Don't ever fucking surprise me. So it was a very good thing to be told early on in my career, because that's when I learned transparency. No matter what I'm doing, I stitch the whole piece together to communicate it to the right way. Keep your bosses informed, keep your people that report into you informed. Make sure that people are aware of what's going on in your head. Nobody's a mind reader, but communication's that big piece that actually makes even the worst defeat, it gives you an opportunity to turn that ship around.
Right. And you talked about mind reading, and most of my career has been in technical writing. And so my biggest thing has always been, you guys need to be more specific on what the process is, because I'm not a mind reader. And if I was a mind reader, then we would not be here right now. We would probably be on a beach somewhere in the south of Spain or something.
You bring up a really good point. So again, there's a lot of smart people that have come up with smart concepts, based on their real life experiences. Like the concept of Gemba. It's going to where the problem is, not bringing the problems up to the leadership. What does that do? Sometimes communication, different languages, different backgrounds, it doesn't transfer well upstairs. But if you go down to where the work is happening and you actually see what is being done, you're able to catch and cast a fresh set of eyes to say, that's the problem. And that's the aha moment for a lot of people. So again, we'll go into a lot of those concepts with these podcasts and in the book that gives a lot of tools that say, it's not the end of the world. There is help out there. And here's how the help is.
So let's go off script a little bit here. We were just talking about failure. Do you have an example of a failure where communication helped resolve it or would have helped resolve it if you had established a communication cycle before that?
Yes, but I'm going to keep it very obscure so as to not piss people off here. But yeah,
I have one I can share myself.
Okay, that's good. Well, there's a lot of, again, I like to read a lot of books, and one of the books that I really liked was this book called Grand Strategy. I'll drop a reference in the comments about the book, but it's a solid book. So there was this instance where I was working for an employer and they had this grandiose scheme of what they wanted to do. They had set down this path, and then, I was brought in to work on this path that was established. But the problem with that was there were a handful of individuals that have the full game plan in their head. You're brought in to solve a problem. You don't know the problem. You don't know what to solve. So you take a layout of the land and see where the issues are. And like any good leader, you start making plans for how to fix the gaps, how to build the bridges, and how to get everybody from one side to the other. And you go down that path, you'll still end up coming short. You will check every box. You'll hit every metric. But still it comes up short because the big strategy, again, if it's not communicated with a clear vision and a clear direction, all the way from the top level C-suite to the operators and the techs that are working in your areas, it is very hard for you to succeed. Now, flip the script on the other side. If they have this plan, a grand scheme on what is going to happen that is stitched together really well, and they had communicated it to their leaders, and those leaders are really bought into that strategy, and they continue pushing that strategy while fixing the gaps and building those bridges to ensure that strategy works, it would have been a completely different outcome. Now, what did we miss here? Nobody made any mistakes. I think the biggest problem or the biggest loophole here was communication. You don't know what you don't know, and you can't fix what you don't know. And odds are, when you're fixing those things, you're still fixing good stuff, but it might come out short. One of the things I've learned early on since I first started is no matter what organization you pick up, could be anything, anywhere, any industry, have a vision. What is the vision? What do you want this collective of people to do, to execute? How do you want them to do it? If they do it, what are the metrics that say they have actually done it? Because it's not money that keeps people. Thankfully, every role I've had, other than unnatural business, changes, I haven't had attrition in my organizations. At the same time, I've been in places where we hadn't given people bonuses for a couple of years. People did not leave me. The reason is they knew what they were fighting for. They knew how they were doing. They knew they were successful in what they were doing within the control of what they had. That kept them engaged. They were coming up with new ideas. How else can I contribute? They were feeling energized to do something different. How to make this turn around? People need to feel belonged. Every step in the organization has to feel that sense of belonging. And that belonging doesn't just come from running a bunch of surveys and picking on 5 questions and say, okay, we are pretty satisfied with what we're getting. No, it's the undertone of those questions. And it comes from the frontline leaders, the site leads, the shift leads, the managers, the first line managers, directors, who are very in tune with what each of their organizations is feeling. How are they doing? And long story short, communicate what you think. Tell them how they win. Show them when they win. Explain to them when they lose, why they lost, and how we can do better next time. And that's the most important part. And that's missed a lot.
So going back to your example of the lack of upper level communication affecting the errors, the issues of like your level, is kind of like if 2 groups of people were building a tunnel under a big river or something, and they both have a plan to get there, and they find out that once they're at the point where they're supposed to meet, that they're hundreds of feet apart.
There's a real world example on that too. But I'm pretty sure a lot of communication, sometimes over communication, especially as leaders, there's no such thing as over communication. Communication, vision, direction, and course correction as you go down that direction path is business critical.
So my example of a failure, actually, it's all my fault. Everything in this example is my fault. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was in charge of a group of people putting together a document for the U.S. Army. And it was for a compressor that Army had a specific way of how they repaired the compressor. Now, me, in my mind, I started from the top and worked my way all the way down to the bottom on taking the thing apart and then checking all the parts and then building it all back up. And I guided my team in preparing this manual to do exactly that, and went to our customer and made a presentation at the time. And the customer, as I was going through the explanation of this process, I noticed that they all had the look on their face like they wanted to throw up. And I thought, oh my God, I just made a real error here. And what it was, after I made the presentation, they explained to me how it's actually done, how the Army actually took the stuff apart. And it was nothing like the way I did it. So potentially we had lost months of work. But fortunately, I had the foresight to package the process in smaller chunks. So we were able to just replace the chunks in a certain way and then add our little segues here and there. And we're actually able to put the whole thing together so we did not miss any of the timelines or anything. And the customer, the U.S. Army, was extremely happy with what they got. They actually gave us another contract for more manuals and stuff like that. But I also, as a result of this, tried to make sure that I sat down with my team and said, okay, look, this is how I screwed up. I did not communicate with the customer well enough to understand their needs, their process. And this is how we can learn from it. And this is how we move forward with the rest of the project.
But see, both the examples, it comes down to communication. Either you communicating with your customer or your customer coming out and saying with clarity, vision, and direction to say, I have a compressor. Now, granted, I don't know any background on this. We have not talked about this ever before. So here's my compressor. Here's how I take it apart. Watch one of my guys do it. Now go build a manual on it. It saves a lot of time, effort, and energy for all parties involved versus trying to read minds, going about it a tactical way on however somebody operates, put it together, and then reiterate. Same thing happens with the corporate world, right? Where, okay, you need something done. If you don't have clarity, let's sit down, do it as a Kaizen or some other event, build that clarity into your thought. Let us flush those thoughts out. Use your leaders, trust your team to flush them out, to get the clarity, set it in rock, and then move forward on executing on it. Versus the backwards way of doing it, readjusting it, doing it, readjusting it.
Right.
And the general population loses trust and faith in leadership when you do that.
Which we will also talk about in greater detail later
Yes.
as well. So do we want to continue talking about stuff, or do we want to wrap it up right now? I do want to make sure that anybody who's listening understands, yes, we jumped around a little bit. We talked about some things that you might not know anything about at this point, but we do have every intent to circle back and have greater discussions about things like communication and the importance of communication, the importance of trust, these types of things. And stick around with us and we'll try to explain these things.
Before we wrap up, why do it now? Why did we decide to do this now? What triggered this, right? I think our audience has the same question we have.
Why now?
Why now? And I think that the challenge is, and I think we both come from different places, different organizations, different styles of working and leadership. And where we have come together, we've realized if they have good direction and engagement and people want to do all the right things, they tend to ask a lot of questions. The opportunity to channel those questions and weed out who is potential leadership material and to start grooming them and start mentoring them so they would stay on that path and not get disheartened. Right. Give them as many resources to feel like this is an achievable goal. This is a task that I'm up for. Not today, not tomorrow, maybe in a year, maybe in a few years, but it's a path that I can achieve. And I think the timing was everything. We were at the right place at the right time, and we had the right group of younger minds that we were able to capture. And that's what got us thinking, who else is out there? that wants to do this,
Right.
right? Who else wants to learn, move, go down this path, but don't have the right avenue or the right mentorship or the right education, not from a degree standpoint, but from a heart to heart talk to say, okay, these are the things, this is where you'll fail, but it's okay. This is what you'll learn from your failures, right? And I think some of the things that you were doing were critical to weed a lot of that out, especially with your classes. You were teaching a lot on leadership, and especially for a lot of the early career individuals. I think that was pretty eye opening to know what your leader should be like, what your leader should do, what your leader shouldn't do. And I think that was that was something that I had not done anywhere in my previous organizations, and I was very happy when you started it. And it actually opened up the pathway to a lot of different things. And there were a lot of positive outcomes of you trying to teach leadership to this very nascent crew that had just come out of college.
Well, and don't forget, there were people in that group as well who had years of experience, but were just getting to the point where they were finding that they couldn't figure out how to move forward. They couldn't figure out how to work with their bosses who may have been management types as opposed to leaders. And these were also very important people in our group to have these conversations that we had in those classes and stuff.
And it's true, because it's not just where we are in time and space, but across the board, just having these conversations, knowing is half the battle. Having these open conversations on a consistent basis changes the paradigm. It triggers thoughts, even in experienced leaders. They are aware of these concepts, but it has fallen through the cracks. They're busy, they're juggling a lot of things, but having those has helped them as well. Even the senior folks that were in the room, they have benefited from it. They have understood where they could be putting more efforts into, because they're hearing from the people in an unbiased, unobjective environment where, okay, it's all about leadership and this is what they're bringing up. Okay, what do we do better? And I think it has helped them out.
Right. And one of the things, too, that I think is really important to mention is how much it challenged both you and I. It's important for people to understand that just because you have classes in leadership and you've been a leader in an organization and have done the best you can, that's not the end of the journey. The journey is a constant journey, and it's not always pretty. And this is another thing that we're going to talk about. Something we talk about in the book is sometimes, as I have said, even the best coaches in sports are hired only to be fired. We all need to learn. We all need to grow. We all need to fail. We all need to know that we're all in the same boat here. And what might work for us, we're hoping is going to work for you. But it's not always going to be that case either. And maybe you as a listener will find better ways of doing things, and you will contact us and let us know, hey, this worked better for me. And it's information that we could share with everybody.
Absolutely. And I think that was the intent of the book, and that's the intent of the podcast, is to have conversations that are going to be thought-provoking, that is going to go send people down rabbit holes that they never thought they would go down. It's like YouTube. You start watching something, and the next thing you know, you're freaking halfway around the world looking at some video of some, soak or a market that's making some weird food, which is fine, but before you know, it's 2 a.m. But we want to do that with leadership, right? You talk about certain concepts, something resonates with somebody really strongly, or the other way around, and they will at some point go research a little bit more, and they'll get really engaged.
Yeah, and what everybody should also realize is that Pavan and I have been having these conversations for months now, and we often circle around the drain on some of these topics over and over again, and we find the enjoyment in that. We enjoy challenging each other. We enjoy agreeing and disagreeing with each other. We enjoy sharing our experiences, and these are the things that we intend to do with you as the listener, and hopefully we can catch you up to date with some of these conversations that Pavan and I have been having for months.
With all the creative juices flowing. No, this is pretty good. I'm actually enjoying this.
Okay, so I think we're going to wrap up for this one. Again, as I mentioned, look for episode 2 to come out in a couple weeks from now. Also, look for our book, We want to thank you dearly for listening to our crazy conversation. We promise there will be more crazy conversations in the future. So today, what did we talk about today? Why don't you give us a quick recap of some of the things we talked about?
Absolutely. We talked about the book, The Journey to Exceptional Leadership. We talked about why we started doing this. Considering what we were both doing, it's a crazy journey to be down on having a full-time job. It has not been easy, but it was extremely rewarding experience, especially for me who has never written a page in my life. So Matt, who did the heavy lifting on this.
That's reason enough for everybody to go out and buy the book. You want to see what an original non-English speaker can put together in a book.
At a breakneck pace. And we talked about, what are we trying to do here? The good, the bad, and the ugly of the leadership. And the time and space of where we are and who the audience is and what we want to capture and what we want them to get out of this and how they can have access to these resources, how they can have access to the mentorship through the Future Forward Consulting Group or directly interacting with us through the podcast platforms and to try and grow. Because I think leadership, like we started out with saying, is a rewarding experience. We want more people to feel included and more people to feel like this is daunting. But it's not. This is something that's actually simpler if you have a clear game plan. And that's what we want to get out of this.
And two of the things that we talk about, and I am a firm believer in there are three legs to proper leadership. And two of those things we talked about today, those things being communication and trust. Of course, we talk more about communication, not so much as much about trust. But again, like I mentioned, we will be going into greater detail on all these things. The third thing, you know what? I'm just going to keep the third thing as a surprise.
A cliffhanger.
Cliffhanger.
Okay.
So if you guys enjoyed listening to us, once again, please subscribe. We can be found on Spotify, Google Music, Apple Music. You can access these podcasts through my website, which is future-forward-consulting.com. And I think that's everything for today. Thank you, Pavan.
Thank you, man.
Thank you for failing with me.
It has been rewarding so far. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Bye, everyone.